You live in a time when the world feels heavy, as if invisible hands are shaping the direction of your thoughts and emotions. Every day you wake up to a flood of voices telling you what to fear, what to desire, what to hate, and what to defend. You sense the tension in conversations, in the silence between people, and even in the way strangers look at each other. It is as if a great current is pushing humanity into opposing sides, forcing you to choose, even when you do not want to. You feel it in the air, a constant pull of division. Families split over ideas, friends drift apart because of opinions, and entire communities are torn in half. The world does not need to tell you directly what is happening. You already feel the pressure in your body, in your nervous system, in the way you hesitate before speaking, wondering who will agree with you and who will attack you. This is the atmosphere of polarization. But beneath all of this noise, something deeper is at play. You start to realize that the constant conflict may not even be about the issues themselves. It may be about something more hidden, something that is not spoken but that guides the collective like a shadow. The truth is that the more divided people are, the easier they are to control. When humanity is busy fighting itself, it forgets to ask the essential question: who is pulling the strings? At times you may feel that you are choosing freely, that your thoughts are your own, that your feelings arise naturally. Yet, if you pause long enough to reflect, you notice a disturbing pattern. How often do your strongest emotions appear after a headline, after an image repeated on a screen, after the echo of a popular opinion that everyone seems to carry at the same time? The same anger, the same fear, the same judgment, repeated again and again until it feels like reality itself. You begin to sense that you are not only living in your own mind, you are living in a shared field of perception, and this field can be manipulated. Every conflict you see outside feeds into this invisible field. Every thought you allow to grow in reaction to it strengthens that field. And slowly you realize something that shakes you deeply. If this field is shaped by observation, then whoever directs your observation directs your reality. This is why you feel so exhausted by the endless noise. Your attention is pulled into 1,000 directions at once, making you believe that you are free, when in truth you are being guided by the invisible architecture of attention. And when attention is captured, the self becomes enslaved. But here lies the paradox. The very power that is used to manipulate you is also the same power that can set you free. The question is whether you continue to live as a passive observer of the stories handed to you, or whether you awaken as the conscious creator of your own inner world. You are about to enter a journey into the observer effect, not as a theory locked in physics textbooks, but as a living truth that explains why you feel trapped and how you can break free. You will see that reality itself bends to the focus of your awareness, and that the first step to freedom is reclaiming what has always been yours. The power to choose where you look, what you see, and what you create. The reality of mass manipulation. You begin to notice that what surrounds you is not just random noise. It is a carefully orchestrated environment that captures your attention before you even realize it. Every headline, every image, every argument that spreads like fire on the lips of strangers is designed to make you look, to make you react, and to make you feed energy into the field of division. The world has learned that the most powerful resource is not gold, not oil, not technology. It is your attention. Think about how easily your emotions are triggered. A single sentence on a screen can ignite anger. A single image can bring fear to life. A single repetition can convince you that something is true even when it is not. You live in a time when perception is more valuable than reality itself, because if perception is controlled, reality follows. And the paradox is that most people believe they are choosing freely, when in truth they are moving inside a script written by someone else. This is the essence of mass manipulation. It does not need to tell you directly what to think. It only needs to create the conditions where you will arrive at the desired conclusion by yourself, convinced that it was your own idea. You see it in the way conflicts escalate. Not because individuals naturally hate one another, but because they are fed the same narrative until it becomes almost impossible to resist. You may recall moments when you felt outrage about something, only to realize later that you knew almost nothing about it. Yet the emotion was real, almost overwhelming. This is how manipulation works. It does not need your reason, it only needs your reaction. Once your reaction is captured, your energy is no longer yours. There is a cycle at play. It begins with distraction. Your attention is drawn toward a conflict, a fear, a problem that seems larger than life. Then comes repetition. The same story appears again and again until it feels undeniable. Finally comes identification. You take the story into your own sense of self. It becomes personal. You do not just hear about division, you feel divided inside yourself. You do not just hear about fear, you live in fear. The tragedy is that entire populations can be moved like this. Not through chains or force, but through carefully planted images, words, and emotions. Mass manipulation does not lock you in a cage. It convinces you to build the cage yourself and to defend it as if it were freedom. This is why you feel the weight of polarization so strongly. It is not only about disagreements or ideas. It is about the deeper current that thrives when people forget that they share the same human. As long as attention is fixed on conflict, the collective cannot rise above it. And as long as individuals remain reactive, they do not see who benefits from their division. At this point, you may feel a growing awareness. You start to ask yourself, how many of my thoughts are truly my own? How many of my emotions are born within me? And how many are borrowed from the field of noise that surrounds me? When you sit quietly, away from screens and conversations, you begin to sense a difference. There are thoughts that feel heavy, almost forced, as if they were implanted. And there are thoughts that feel light, authentic, connected to something deeper inside you. This distinction is the beginning of freedom. To see the reality of mass manipulation is not to become paranoid. It is to reclaim your right to choose where your mind rests. It is to stop being moved like a piece on a chessboard and to recognize that you can step outside the game. The moment you realize that your attention is the target, you also realize that your attention is the weapon. If it can be used against you, it can also be used for you. And this is where the observer effect enters the story. Physics has already shown that what is observed changes according to the act of observation. What few realize is that this is not just a scientific curiosity. It is the foundation of how reality itself unfolds in your daily life. If your attention is constantly stolen, then your reality is being shaped by forces outside you. But if you reclaim your attention, you begin to shape reality from within. The observer effect explained in simple terms. You have already sensed that your attention is not neutral. The moment you look at something, it grows in your awareness. But science has given us a clear picture of this truth through one of the most mysterious experiments ever conducted. It is called the double slit experiment. Imagine a simple setup: a wall with two narrow openings and a screen behind it. When scientists fire particles like electrons through the slits, something strange happens. If no one is observing, the particles behave like waves. They spread out and create a pattern of interference, as if each particle went through both slits at once. Reality seems to exist in multiple possibilities at the same time. But when a detector is placed to observe which slit the particle goes through, the behavior changes instantly. The particles act like solid objects. They go through one slit or the other, never both. The interference pattern disappears. The act of observation changes the outcome. This result defies common sense. It suggests that particles exist in a state of probabilities until someone observes them. Observation collapses possibilities into a single reality. The experiment has been repeated countless times, and the conclusion remains the same. Observation does not just reveal reality, it shapes it. Now pause for a moment and reflect on this. If reality at the most fundamental level responds to observation, what does that say about your life? Every time you focus on fear, you collapse possibilities into fear. Every time you dwell on division, you collapse possibilities into division. Your mind works like the detector in the experiment. Where you place your awareness, reality follows. This is the essence of the observer effect. It is not about controlling the world outside with sheer willpower. It is about recognizing that your inner focus has the power to tune into one version of reality over another. Imagine that life is full of parallel paths. One path is heavy with fear and conflict. Another path carries peace and clarity. Another path holds opportunity and growth. All of them exist as potential. Your observation determines which one solidifies as your lived experience. Perhaps you have experienced this without realizing it. You wake up in a bad mood, and suddenly the day seems filled with obstacles. Every small challenge grows larger. People appear more irritating, problems multiply. But on another day, when you wake with gratitude, the same world looks different. Strangers smile at you. Solutions appear with ease. The world has not changed, you have changed. Your observation selected a different pattern. Neuroscience supports this perspective. Your brain is constantly filtering information. Out of millions of signals around you, it selects only a fraction for your conscious mind. What it chooses depends on your focus. If you believe the world is dangerous, your brain highlights threats. If you believe the world is supportive, your brain highlights opportunities. Your inner observation literally edits your outer experience. This is not to say that everything is an illusion or that problems do not exist. Rather, it means that reality is far more fluid than you think. You are not passively living in a fixed world. You are interacting with a field of probabilities. Your attention acts as a sculptor, carving one possibility into form while leaving countless others unrealized. Think again about the power of this. If those who control narratives can capture your attention, they can shape which version of reality becomes dominant for you and for society. But if you reclaim your observation, you break their control. You remember that your focus is not a slave to external stories. It is a creative force. This is why the observer effect is more than a scientific curiosity. It is a mirror showing you the hidden power you carry every moment. You are not just drifting through events. You are participating in the unfolding of reality itself. The crucial question is simple yet profound. Are you observing consciously or unconsciously? If unconsciously, you are like a detector placed by someone else. Your focus is programmed, your reality pre-shaped, your life reduced to reactions. But if consciously, you step into your true role as co-creator. You begin to notice when fear is being planted in you. You begin to notice when division is trying to pull your attention. And with that awareness, you can choose differently. The experiment in physics is an invitation to you. Just as the electron responds to the gaze of the observer, your life responds to the gaze of your mind. The more aware you become of this truth, the more you understand that freedom is not something given to you by the world. Freedom is something you claim by deciding where to look. Como hoy fido observador e usado contra voca. You begin to see the pattern when you slow down. The same stories appear again and again in different voices. The same outrage travels across platforms and conversations like a single flame igniting dry grass. It is not accidental. It is the work of systems that know how to capture your attention and then steer it. These systems do not need to force your hand. They only need to keep the light trained on a single point until you willingly step into that light and become its performer. Consider the mechanics. First comes amplification. A fragment of information, selected for its emotional charge, is amplified through repetition. You see it, you hear it, you are nudged to respond. Next comes simplification. Complex realities are broken into binary choices. You are invited to choose quickly and loudly. Finally comes identity formation. The choice becomes a label. You are now part of a group that affirms the same narrative. Your mind senses belonging and you hold the position more fiercely than you would otherwise. The modern attention economy is built on these moves. Algorithms learn what makes you pause, what makes you feel, and then they show you more of the same. That is why your feed often looks like an echo chamber. It is not designed to inform, it is designed to intensify. Intensified attention breeds certainty. Certainty hardens into conviction. Conviction becomes a fortress around identity. Once you are inside the fortress, your view narrows. You stop noticing alternative angles, alternative facts, and alternative paths. This is where the observer effect is weaponized. When mass attention is focused on particular images of threat, your collective observation collapses possibilities into a singular reality of fear. When your attention is redirected toward rivalry and blame, countless other possibilities of cooperation and compassion fade into the background. It is not random which possibilities are made visible. Someone has decided which possibilities are useful to keep visible and which are easier to hide. You feel this in personal relationships. A single political label can change how you speak to a friend. A single rumor can turn neighbor against neighbor. The smallest prompt can trigger a defensive posture in you, and the defensive posture colors everything you do. Once you react, you generate more material for the amplifiers. Your reaction becomes the currency they trade in. You are rewarded with validation when you conform to the script, and you are punished with ridicule or isolation when you deviate. Gradually, your inner compass bends toward the public wind. There are quieter techniques at play too. Emotional framing bends rational thought. Facts are framed in a way that inflames emotion first, and reason follows in service of the felt state. Repetition without depth replaces investigation. You accept a narrative not because you have verified it, but because your nervous system has been conditioned to accept it. In this conditioned state, your capacity for critical reflection reduces. You become more likely to adopt the identity that the story prescribes. This architecture works on the collective level because it begins in the individual mind. 1,000,000 individual reactions produce a field of attention so strong that it appears as reality itself. The field then feeds back into individual minds, confirming the story and strengthening the pattern. It is a loop that sustains itself until someone interrupts it. Interrupting it requires a deliberate shift in how you use your attention. You can begin to notice the triggers, the rhythms, and the shapes of the narratives that seek you. You can learn to identify the moments when your nervous system is being pushed toward urgency. You can choose not to amplify. You can refuse the simplification that forces you into a binary. You can opt out of identity as a battleground and instead treat your beliefs as provisional maps rather than absolute territories. This is not passivity, it is strategic clarity. When you no longer feed the mechanism with frantic reactions, it loses speed. It requires your energy to spin. Without that energy, the loudness diminishes and the false certainties begin to look flimsy. The more people practice this restraint, the more the collective field loosens its grip. You do not end the conflict overnight, but you begin to stop participating in the machine that reproduces it. At the same time, you do not withdraw into indifference. The point is not to deny reality or to avoid responsibility. The point is to use observation deliberately. You can observe injustice without becoming possessed by rage. You can hold concern without being consumed by fear. You can engage with the world from a place of creative intention rather than reflexive reactivity. That choice changes the form of your action. It changes whom you serve with your attention. When you reclaim the capacity to choose what you observe, you also reclaim the capacity to collapse new possibilities into being. Rather than unconsciously reinforcing narratives that fragment the social fabric, you become an agent who can stabilize compassion, curiosity, and courage. The weapon that was turned against you becomes a tool for healing. The same focus that once produced division can now produce bridges. The same intensity that once amplified fear can now amplify clarity. This shift is not small, it ripples outward. Each moment you refuse the scripted reaction, you teach others by example. Each time you choose a slower, clearer observation, you reduce the fuel available to those who profit from division. The architecture of manipulation requires your attention to function. If attention becomes thoughtful and selective, the system no longer runs on autopilot through you. You begin to take back the interior ground that is the true frontier of freedom. Transition from passive observer to conscious creator. You have seen how attention can be captured and spun into a story that no longer feels like yours. Now you must move from being a passive observer to becoming a conscious creator. This change is not dramatic at first. It is a series of small shifts in how you use your attention, how you orient your mind, and how you structure your inner life. The first step is to notice without judgment. When you pause and observe the moment you are triggered, you separate yourself from the automatic loop. That pause is the space of choice. In that space, you can decide whether to hand your energy to the noise or to use it for your own clarity. Start by practicing short intervals of deliberate attention. For 5 minutes each morning, sit quietly and follow your breath. Do not try to control the breath. Simply notice how the body moves as you breathe. When thoughts arise, name them lightly as passing events and bring your attention back to the breath. This practice trains your nervous system to return to a calm center. It is not mystical, it is practical training for attention. The more you build this habit, the less easily your attention is hijacked by urgent stimuli. Next, cultivate a habit of selective exposure. Choose the sources that inform you, but do not possess your attention. Limit the time you spend in feeds that amplify outrage. Create windows of silence during your day where you refuse input. In those windows, allow your mind to process without external pressure. You will find that without constant inflow of reactive content, your natural priorities come back into view. Your values begin to guide your focus rather than the loudest voice in the room. Practice asking a single question before you react. When you feel pulled into a heated exchange, ask yourself, is this worth my attention right now? If the answer is no, breathe and disengage. If the answer is yes, ask a second question. What outcome do I want from this interaction? If your aim is clarification or constructive input, proceed with calm. If your aim is to win an argument, notice that you are feeding the game that benefits from division. That second question creates a filter. It moves you from reflex to intention. Use simple rituals to anchor your day. Before you open your phone, say silently, I will use my attention today for what builds life. This small phrase acts as a boundary. It reminds you that attention is a resource you steward. Rituals reduce the risk of starting the day unconscious. They tune your mind to the inner editor who chooses where to place the beam of awareness. Learn to create frames for your engagement. A frame tells you the role you will play before an interaction begins. Will you be a listener? Will you be a learner? Will you be a healer? When you define your frame, you protect your attention from being drained by fights you do not need. Frames create intention. Intention shapes observation. Observation shapes reality. Another essential practice is the practice of noticing emotional tone before content. Emotions are the gateway to reactivity. When you are able to label the feeling in your body and name it, you reduce its power. Say silently, "I am feeling anger," or "I am feeling fear." Naming interrupts the automatic chain of reaction. It gives you the moment required to choose a response that is aligned with who you want to be. Train your attention to look for possibilities rather than threats. This does not mean ignoring danger. It means intentionally scanning the environment for options, for allies, for small openings where you can act with integrity. Possibility-oriented attention collapses outcomes into solutions rather than into problems that multiply. It shifts the field from scarcity into curiosity and creativity. Practice micro acts of creation. Each day, do one small act that expresses your values. Speak kindly to someone you disagree with. Send a message of appreciation. Offer help where it is needed without expectation. These acts are practical training sessions for using attention creatively. They teach your nervous system that focus can build connection rather than fuel separation. Finally, cultivate patience with the process. You will not flip overnight from passive to conscious. Old habits have weight. They will tug and pull. When you fall into reactivity, do not punish yourself. Observe the lapse, learn from it, and return to the practice. Each return strengthens the neural pathways for choice. Over time, the habit of conscious observation becomes the default. As your attention becomes more deliberate, you will feel an inner expansion. You will notice that the world responds differently. Situations that once felt overwhelming will offer more options. Conflicts will become invitations to practice clarity. The shift from passive observer to conscious creator is not only a personal victory, it is a foundational disruption of the systems that rely on your reactive energy. By choosing where to place your gaze, you no longer participate in the machinery of manipulation. You become a source of new possibilities, breaking the repetitive cycles of humanity. You now see how attention shapes personal reality. The next step is to understand how repeated patterns at the collective level form long loops across generations. Human history shows cycles of concentration of power followed by resistance, patterns of fear followed by chaos, and phases of rebuilding followed by complacency. These cycles remain until a sufficient number of individuals alter their internal patterns. The field that sustains repetition is not only external. It is created by millions of repeated acts of attention and behavior that lock a pattern into the world. To break cycles, you must act both inwardly and outwardly. First, recognize the anatomy of a historical loop. It often begins with a crisis that creates urgency. Leaders or systems respond with narratives that promise safety through alignment. People bundle together around identities that seem to offer security. Over time, the identity hardens and opposition grows. The stage is set for conflict. After the conflict, exhaustion invites a return to normalcy without addressing the core pattern. The loop repeats because the underlying human responses remain unexamined. When you look at a cycle with this clarity, you understand where to intervene. You do not have to change history by brute force. You change it by interrupting the repetition in your own behavior and by modeling alternatives to the reactive script. If many people refuse to respond in the predictable, angry way, the pattern loses its automatic momentum. If enough people refuse to accept scarcity framed as inevitability, the field that supports scarcity weakens. One method to break cycles is to practice generational thinking. Imagine the world you want in 10 years and in 30 years. Make choices today that align with that long-term image, rather than with the immediate surge of emotion. When you orient decisions toward multi-generational outcomes, you resist the short-term manipulations that make cycles repeat. You become a stabilizing influence. Another method is to practice public repair. When a conflict arises in your circle, seek repair rather than escalation. Offer to listen before judging. Propose a small collaborative act that creates common ground. These micro-repairs do not fix large systems overnight, but they inoculate the field against the contagion of division. Repair teaches others a new pattern. It shows that conflict can be met with restoration rather than with mirror retribution. Teach awareness to the next generation. Children absorb the patterns that surround them. If they see adults who model mindful attention, respectful disagreement, and courageous repair, they internalize those habits. Education that includes emotional literacy and attention training is an essential tool for preventing the repetition of destructive cycles. Resist the temptation to moralize others who are trapped in the loop. Moralization creates separation and fuels the same dynamics you aim to interrupt. Instead, hold a clear boundary about what you will not participate in and extend practical support for those who seek a different path. Boundaries without condemnation protect the field while offering a route for change. Use rituals of remembrance that transform fear into responsibility. Historical memory can become either a weapon or a teacher. When communities ritualize lessons from the past in ways that emphasize accountability and learning, they reduce the chance of repeating the same mistake. Rituals that honor losses while committing to different choices are powerful collective practices. Finally, act both locally and consistently. Large-scale change emerges from persistent local choices. Volunteer where attention and resources are needed. Vote where your systems allow you to do so with clarity. Build relationships across difference. These acts accumulate into a new field that favors cooperation and foresight. When enough individuals practice these orientations, the loop weakens. Repetition needs fuel. When fuel shifts from fear to responsibility, history can bend. Your daily choices matter more than grand pronouncements. Each intentional act is a pebble that alters the current and eventually the shape of the river. Self-mastery as an interior revolution. Self-mastery is the disciplined cultivation of your inner life so that you live with dignity and clarity. It is not a show of force, it is a steady return to honest presence. The practices that build mastery are simple and repeated. Wake at a steady hour. Keep your phone away for the first part of your morning. Move your body. Nourish your mind with reading that stretches rather than numbs. These habits compose a container that supports deeper work. Discipline in this sense is not punishment. Discipline is the design of conditions that make your highest choice easier to enact. When you structure your day to favor depth over distraction, you reduce the friction that allows external noise to take hold. Discipline is an act of love for the person you want to become. It creates trust between your present self and your future self. Clarity arises when you prune the commitments that do not belong to you. Learn to say no without guilt to invitations that drain attention and energy. Clarify your values and let them be the guide for your daily choices. When your actions align with clear values, you experience integrity. Integrity anchors you. It makes you less likely to be blown by every loud story. Cultivate practices that expand your inner observation. Daily reflection is one such practice. At the end of each day, ask, what did I feed with my attention today? What moments surprised me? Where did I yield to reaction rather than respond with intention? These questions train your inner eye to spot subtle shifts. Over time, the inner reflections replace blame with learning. Hold dignity as a daily discipline. Dignity shows up when you refrain from shaming others, when you keep your word, and when you protect the sacredness of honest conversation. Dignity resists the collapse into petty victory. It is what allows you to act with authority without coercion. When you embody dignity, you invite others to meet you at a higher level. Mastery requires choosing practice over perfection. You will fail and then restart. The point is not to never err. The point is to create a rhythm of return. Each return rewires the brain toward resilience and presence. Gradually, your nervous system learns to expect steadiness instead of alarm. That expectation becomes a source of power. Mastery also includes capacity for rest. Rest is not the opposite of productivity. Rest is recovery that protects clarity. Allowing yourself restorative breaks keeps your attention available for what matters. You cannot steward attention if you are depleted. Finally, recognize that self-mastery is a form of resistance to manipulation. A person who governs their inner life cannot be easily drawn into the spectacle of mass reaction. Self-mastery is the quiet revolution that undermines the machinery of control. The person who holds steady becomes a seed for others to grow toward composure. You have moved from the recognition of a field shaped by external forces to the practical path of reclaiming attention. You now understand that observation is not a passive act. It is a creative force that collapses possibilities into a lived reality. You also see that history repeats when attention is left unexamined and that cycles are broken when individuals choose differently. The journey to freedom is practical and interior. Start with small acts that train your attention. Build a ritual that protects your morning. Choose the sources that inform you without possessing your mind. Name your feelings before they become action. Repair rather than escalate. Teach the next generation to notice and to respond wisely. These habits are the bricks of a new field. Do not mistake the scale of your actions for their importance. A single moment of measured attention can change the tone of a conversation, and 1,000 such moments reshape the contours of the social field. The revolution you seek begins in the small decisions you make every day. Remember that self-mastery is not withdrawal from the world. It is an engaged presence that refuses to be consumed by the spectacle of division. It is a dedicated choice to use attention as a creative instrument. When you live in that way, you no longer feed the patterns that repeat suffering. So choose your gaze. Choose clarity over alarm. Choose repair over revenge. Choose dignity over reaction. In the quiet act of choosing, you reclaim a freedom that no external force can grant or take away. Your observation is the key. Use it with courage and with love. If this message resonated with you, subscribe now to stay connected with the energy that awakens you. Like this video to anchor this frequency in your field. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a transmission that your spirit needs. And comment below, I am the frequency. Let the universe hear your voice. You're not here by chance. You're here to rise and remember who you truly are.